All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning to learn how property management firms are getting LL97 done. I'm Lisa Grayson, Deputy Manager of the New York City Accelerator program. Today, I'll provide a brief overview of LL97 and the New York City Accelerator services, and then dive into our panel discussion featuring three multifamily property management firms paired with their respective New York City Accelerator account managers. New York City Accelerator, first, a couple of housekeeping notes. All attendees are going to be muted, but will be able to submit questions through the Q&A section on Zoom. We will address as many as possible with written answers during the presentation, as well as during the Q&A session at the end of the panel discussion. We'll also make the PowerPoint slides available following the webinar. So let's jump into the presentation, and then saving the best for last, we'll meet our panelists. To fully understand LL97 and other building laws, I think it's important to take a step back and understand why the law is important to New York City's future. In New York City, nearly 70% of the city's emissions come from buildings, and by 2050, 90% of our existing buildings will still be here. And the majority of these buildings are multifamily buildings, both affordable and market rate, as well as mixed use. In addition to this, it's important to note that New York City has committed to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. That means in order to achieve this goal, we must tackle the largest contributor of carbon emissions, which is generated by our buildings. To this end, the city has passed a series of decarbonization policies, including the Climate Mobilization Act of 2019. The Climate Mobilization Act contains four main laws, including LL97, which is the central piece of the law ensuring that the city meets its emission climate goals. So to provide a bit of context, the Climate Mobilization Act is the largest climate solution put forth by any city in the world. It consists of a slate of climate laws designed to dramatically cut carbon in New York City. Central to the CMA is Local Law 97, a first of its kind legislation placing emission limits on New York City's largest buildings. In 2009, the city started the process of enacting laws to move buildings forward toward energy efficiency. LL84 that required buildings to benchmark their energy use, perform energy audits, and retro-commissioning work to ensure that all building systems operate at maximum efficiency, as well as perform lighting upgrades. The Climate Mobilization Act included LL33 and 95, requiring the posting of letter grades reflecting the energy status of buildings, LL92 and 94, requiring the installation of green roofs or solar on new construction or major roof renovations, LL96 that authorized PACE, the Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing, and LL97 that places limits on building greenhouse gas emissions on buildings greater than 25,000 square feet. And then LL154 that requires that all new buildings be fully electrified. As mentioned, LL97 aims to decrease carbon emissions in New York City by 40% by 2030 and be carbon neutral by 2050. The law contains two main parts: Article 320, which sets emission limits for market rate buildings, and Article 321, which provides additional pathways for affordable housing and houses of worship. For buildings covered under 320, the first limits will be applied starting in 2024 through 2029, and the second set in 2030 through 2034. Lower limits will follow in 2035 and continue to move down from there. So the bar chart on the right provides a visualization of the process. Starting from the left, you can see the city's emission levels in the baseline year, which is 2005, represented by the black bar. Moving to the right, you can see the 3 bars in the chart decrease progressively, ultimately getting us to the targeted neutrality to carbon neutrality by 2050. It's important to note that based on the 2022 benchmarking data, only 11% of buildings are projected to be out of compliance in this first cycle, which is 2024 to 2030. So again, I'm going to repeat that only 11% of the buildings are projected to be out of compliance in this first cycle. So those that, are looking to make, that are out of compliance in 2030 have a nice runway to get work done. Affordable housing buildings have the option of either meeting their 2030 limits early or implement the 13 prescriptive energy conservation measures to be compliant. This slide from the Department of Buildings outlines the compliance pathways that Article 320 buildings may pursue. The Accelerator team can help you regardless of the pathway your building follows. DOB continues to provide guidance documents to help building stakeholders understand their compliance pathways and process requirements. And just last week, released the Article 320 information guide. So here is where you can find it. And as you can see from the table of contents, this guide provides additional information on covered buildings, compliance pathways, reporting and extensions, calculations, deduction, and mediated resolutions. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to share a few upcoming webinars that may be of interest to you to learn more about compliance and the details that are rolling out. Yes, we will be making all of the presentations available, and we'll include links to these events moving forward. Now I'm going to transition into an overview of the New York City Accelerator. So what is the Accelerator? The New York City Accelerator is a city program that is here to help buildings control costs, meet compliance requirements, boost their building performance, increase energy savings, and reduce carbon emissions across New York City. We provide free technical guidance to help market transformation. We identify building upgrades. We offer free training and support green workforce development. We connect building decision makers directly with service providers to implement decarbonization projects. And we help buildings identify financial incentives and financing. So who do we work with and how do we work? Who is eligible? Any privately owned building that is greater than 5,000 square feet, new or existing. We refer smaller buildings to our partners in the market. And it's very easy to get connected with us. Just call us, email us, do a web form, and you'll get connected with a dedicated account manager who ideally will be kind of a subject matter expert in your type of building. And then you'll receive objective, customized advice based on your building and your direction that you're going. The service is completely free. There's no obligation, and there's no formal commitment that's required. So this is generally what you can expect to experience when you participate with the program. Each participant's experience is going to look a little bit different as we customize it to meet each building's particular needs. We customize our services to different types of building stakeholders and, work with owners, property managers, boards, a whole array of different building stakeholders. In the case that we may be working with just one building or a few buildings, we'll conduct a high-level assessment of the building, gathering information on the types of systems, the age of the systems, any complaints or issues shared by tenants, what you're planning for capital projects in the near and distant future. And in some cases, we may only need to provide some general information about compliance assistance. When we're working with property management firms, we can provide a portfolio assessment that compiles a whole range of information about the buildings in the portfolio so that we can help the portfolio managers begin to prioritize and sequence their focus on the buildings facing the largest potential fines, or those that may just need to do some of the low-hanging fruit to push their buildings into compliance. As I mentioned, there's no limit to the number of consultations that we can provide, and we're basically here to provide support each step of the way. So again, the account manager is that participant's designated point of contact throughout the entire process. And that account manager will assemble a team of experts from others on our team to meet your project's needs. Our team includes specialists in affordable housing, solar, financing, and new buildings. We'll also can direct you to an array of free resources that can be found on our website. It's important to review all the building data with the building stakeholders, and because although we have lots of data available to us, it may not always be up to date. So confirming your baseline data on your building is where we start to make sure that the assumptions that we're making are on the most current and accurate information. That is where we begin. And then as we go through the process, and I'm not going to dig too deep here, but we'll start to dig in and help you prioritize projects for your building, and then evaluate which financing pathways may be the best fit for you. We identify the options in the buildings that you may want to pursue. And as we go through the journey with you, we identify service providers. And we have a very robust service provider program that range from registered design professionals, engineers, contractors that can perform the work, that range from boiler contractors and HVAC contractors to windows and lighting and much more. So I'll run through a list of that and give you a quick look at our service provider lookup tool that you can use while working with your account manager. We offer free services, free advice on energy efficiency work and decarbonization products, but we do not replace or compete with service providers. We don't do formal ASHRAE level audits, install any conservation measures, but we connect you with the resources and the experts in the market who can do this for you. So here's a look at our service provider lookup tool. You can put in any number or just a few criteria of the type of service provider you may be looking for, and it will pull up a list that you can download. Here's a list of service categories covered, and we're continuing to add both categories and service providers on a continuing basis. So it's a growing and very robust service provider program. So again, to just recap, the New York City Accelerator can help you in a variety of ways. We can just help you in certain areas as you may need it. We can identify financial incentive programs, financing tools, provide technical assistance, help you understand compliance pathways, connect you with service providers, and again, all of our services are at no cost to the building stakeholders. So without further ado, I'm going to move into our panel discussion. Today's goal is to dig deeper into how New York City Accelerator account managers work with property managers to expedite their decarbonization journey and comply with LL97, as well as identify the projects for consideration, connect with the service providers, identify utility and state incentives, and explore financing options. We'll share some of the nuanced issues facing property management firms and how they are creatively addressing them on their journey to LL97 compliance. So let's meet our panel. And I will ask all of our panelists to turn on their cameras, and I will go through and do introductions. Jane Cohen is Vice President of Corporate Responsibility and Communications with the Dermot Company. Jane is a seasoned executive with over 15 years of experience in operations management and a strong focus on sustainability and corporate responsibility. She began her career in property management, where she honed analytical skills and gained invaluable experience in optimizing processes and workflows. As Vice President of Corporate Responsibility and Communications at the Dermot Company, she focused on operational excellence while overseeing the company's sustainability efforts and managing its communication strategy. So thank you, Jane, for being here today. And then we have Peter Lampen, who is Senior Vice President and Director of Energy and Project Management at Douglas Elliman Property Management. Peter works with boards and owners to raise their understanding of LL97 requirements for carbon reduction and help them formulate compliance strategies and create context for capital planning decisions. He is responsible for developing energy education programs for property managers to give them an understanding of the constantly evolving compliance requirements for the multitude of energy laws and regulations. Peter also works with managers and their boards to support capital planning projects from initial planning through construction and closeout, and he directs energy purchasing programs to provide lower cost energy supplies for their managed properties. He also directs the project management group to develop and provide owner representation and project management services to their client boards and owners. And last but not least, Gerald Rivera is the Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Halstead Management Company. Gerald began his career in real estate in the late 1980s after a 6-year commitment in the Air Force as an aircraft electrician. His knowledge and expertise initiated with 20 years of working for 2 family-operated residential real estate firms focused on rental properties, where he learned from owners how to best manage real estate from their perspective. Gerald then transitioned to co-op and condo management from 2010 to 2013. And from 2013 to 16, he served as the general manager at LaFrac City. He joined Halstead in 2016 and currently serves as Senior Vice President and Managing Director. And now moving over to meet our Accelerator account managers. Valerie Corbett is a senior account manager with our team with years of experience. I am not going to dive into all of our account manager experience, but I will make it available as well. Laura Sauer, again, very seasoned account manager, and Katherine Willis, also our senior team here. So I'm going to move on into a quick overview of the portfolio overviews, just so you get a sense of the companies that this team manages. Different sizes of portfolios. Dermot has a portfolio of 18 buildings in the New York market with a pretty even split of market rate and affordable housing. Halstead has a portfolio of 200 buildings, primarily market rate, as is Douglas Elliman with a portfolio of about 330 buildings with primarily market rate and some affordable housing. So let's go into the questions. And we've got a number of questions that we want to cover today. I hope we can get through the majority of them, but I'm going to start with a question about how your property management firm first connected with the New York City Accelerator. And I'm going to start with Jane, and then we'll go to Gerald and then Peter.
All right. Hi, everyone. So Accelerator actually reached out to us. Thank you, Katherine, about one of our properties. And we followed up with them to do a portfolio overview, really looking at where we stand and where we need to get to. So that's the work we've been doing over the last 3 years, I guess now. It's been a while.
That's great. Gerald? How did you connect with the accelerator?
We connected with the New York Accelerator in 2021 when researching options to complement our efforts at improving our energy efforts to comply with local law 97, which, can also improve your energy grade.
Absolutely. And Peter.
I first started working with the mayor's office on a number of their energy programs back with the Clean Heat Task Force in 2010. And then that evolved through the Greater Greener Buildings Plan and benchmarking audits, et cetera, to the first form of the accelerator, the retrofit accelerator, and working with them to help educate our managers and boards, and as that evolved into its current form, the accelerator now.
Great, long history with us. And I know that you've been working with Valerie during a lot of that journey. So that's a long-standing relationship. Next question, and we'll start with Gerald. What motivated your firm to engage with us, and what were your expectations?
Free engineering services, right? As you mentioned many times, free, and people love free stuff, right? So my expectations weren't high, as I didn't realize that the New York Accelerator team were going to provide such excellent services. When you interact with a lot of city agencies, the expectations are high, but you're most of the time you're disappointed. But I have to say that New York Accelerator team, you guys are awesome. The services were excellent. We had one building who spent 80 grand against my suggestions, and they ended up with high cost items to reduce their fees, their fines, and so they opted not to go with those energy saving services that were laid out. And then we got them involved with New York Accelerator, and we definitely got a better deal.
That's great to hear. Peter, what were your expectations?
Well, first, to help me educate my managers, we have monthly seminars, and they provided updates about the laws from its origin in 2019. And as major improvements, updates, additional information came out, they returned to help educate new managers and update other ones. So that was my first interest. Thank you. I'll leave it there.
Okay, no, that's great. And Jane, what were your expectations initially as you started working with the accelerator?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have expectations. I was just excited for the free service. We were spending and are spending a lot of money around local law 97, just trying to understand all the details. So having somebody who had an ear to the ground that can help me parse through the data was very helpful. That helped my team to understand the law better. We've really utilized the connection to the incentives that are being offered. Katherine has been able to connect us with the right folks, the various agencies, and yeah, just get through the confusion and a lot of the details of the law.
Great, thank you. And then kind of digging in a little bit more on that, and getting an understanding of how the accelerator supported your firm in understanding and navigating the requirements of LL97. And let's start with Peter. I think you've
Sure.
kind of covered that a bit, but if you want to dig in a little bit more on 97 specifically, yeah.
Depended on the accelerator to help me reach out to boards when managers came back to us and had difficulty explaining some of the requirements. They enabled me to be more informed also in educating the boards and conducting planning sessions with them.
Excellent. And actually, I'm gonna tap into Valerie a little bit here, because I know she's kind of a master at working with boards. She's got many years of it, and Valerie, if you want to chime in and talk a little bit about that tag teaming that you're doing with Peter to work with boards.
Well, I think some people don't realize this, but we do work with the boards, board members, board president, and we often attend board meetings virtually, and we've been doing that for years and years, and that helps to explain, to all the board members what it is they should be thinking about, how the laws work, the strategy, how to pick contractors, how I will help them with proposals and review proposals. Until they have their team together, and then they start the work. And then they call me all the time just to, ask a quick question or something. But we're there almost like an owner's representative, except it's all free. Just, to help, to sort of hold their hand and help them figure out, what to do. But remember, boards are all volunteers, so they have other things they excel in. But sometimes managing the building is difficult to try to explain to shareholders what they're going to do and all that.
Yep, exactly. Thanks, Valerie. And Gerald, just to reiterate their question, in terms of, how did the accelerator support your understanding of and navigation of LL97?
Well, to echo what Peter just said, New York Accelerator provided a user-friendly format on navigating local law 97 requirements. They just made it easy.
Great, great. All right. Either of the other two account managers want to chime in on any of these questions or topics so far?
Sure. I mean, I can, shed a little light on what Jane and I went through when we first started speaking to one another. As she mentioned, we looked at all of the buildings in her portfolio and all of the available, information about them to really kind of identify where opportunities were and where priorities might need to be as far as local law 97 preparation and engagement and that sort of thing. We had several check-in calls and thought about the various levels of affordability, as is indicated on the slide here, because of course that impacts local law 97 compliance pathways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Oh yeah, I mean, that was very helpful. So understanding like the city was showing some buildings that we no longer had. So kind of going through that with Katherine and adjusting that, making sure that the information that the city has is also what is currently accurate. I think that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah, and that leads into kind of the next question that you're already doing, is sharing any specific examples of successful collaboration between your firm and the accelerator that led to significant progress in your efforts. So yeah, Jane and Katherine, you've kind of led that off nicely. Peter, do you want to add to that additional?
I think a good example would be what I believe is the basis of all planning for 97 is establishing the correct areas for the buildings. And Valerie offered invaluable assistance in providing the exact language, examples of how calculations and certifications might be done, helping to convince boards that this was actually required, and providing consultants who could help get this done for us. So I think that was a key first step, foundation building for the planning.
Great, great. And Gerald, do you want to add in on any other examples of successful collaboration?
Absolutely. So we have a building in Chelsea, and in 2021, when we first connected with New York Accelerator, they introduced us to several aggregators, which included some aggregators from NYSERDA, for Con Edison. We installed the VFDs. We also had the remote management system installation. It was initially priced at $123,000 with $66,000 incentive from Con Edison, and we also received a $24,000 Con Edison incentive for the motors and the VFDs for the building systems. High efficiency motors for the building, for the exhaust fans, and the VFDs, the variable frequency drives for the pumps. And with the parity real-time energy management, Our payback is actually going to be sometime next year. Our first year savings with parity, which has guaranteed savings, paid for itself basically.
That's great.
Yeah, and in 23, the building received the New York Accelerator Award for building performance as a leader in decarbonizing New York City. I was really excited about that, and I actually used that. I used an article from Habitat Magazine to convince 3 other boards to bring in parity and to get New York Accelerator involved. So that's my success story.
That's great. Glad to hear that. Yeah, and you've kind of segued into our next question in terms of kind of specific examples of energy efficiency upgrades or retrofits that have been particularly effective. So it sounds like those upgrades have been quickly and noticeably effective. Let's go to Peter and see if there are any specific energy efficiency upgrades that he'd like to share with everyone. Peter, are you there?
Clicked the wrong button. Here I am. I think one key is aligning upgrades with system life cycles. And a good example of that is a roof replacement and upgrading insulation to the new energy codes. The savings can be large with this, and when aligned, is not really a significant additional cost for the building beyond the roof replacement they had to do. I think another area where there have been significant returns is in a combination of measures to upgrade the steam distribution within buildings, from steam trap replacement, master venting, insulating of pipes, adding interior sensors to an upgraded EMS system as a package can produce very significant improvements and bring many buildings into compliance for this first cycle.
Yeah, that's great. And Jane, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, our portfolio and our company in general, like we have very significant and ambitious sustainability goals as a company. So this is something we've been working on for a while. So a lot of our all of our properties are below the 2024 cap. So we really concentrated on low cost and easy to implement projects. We work with our resident managers to make sure their equipment is running as efficiently as possible. Are the timer settings correct? Is the BMS working properly? Are we adjusting our heating and cooling settings as optimally as possible? So these are all things that we did initially that were really no cost to the buildings. We make sure that our property common areas are as comfortable, but not above or below where it needs to be. And so 1 or 2 degrees on a consistent basis makes a difference in both efficiency and utility costs. We're also working to implement the LED lighting upgrades across the portfolios, which is required by local law 88 anyways, and that's been a significant cost savings on utilities as well. So we're really concentrating on things that provide both the sustainability aspect and a good return on investment.
Fabulous. That's great. All right. I'll give our account managers a chance to chime in here if they'd like to add anything more that maybe the panelists forgot to mention. But again, if not, it sounds like you all covered it really well, but I'll let the account managers chime in if they have anything they'd like to add.
Okay. They mentioned a lot of things, like Peter likes the playbooks that are on our website. And we started those many years ago, but we keep adding to them. So we have new ones for heat pumps and so on. But some buildings can't do that. They can't electrify right now. And some buildings, believe it or not, are still on number 4 oil. And we were working with one that, knew they had to do something. So they couldn't electrify. They didn't have enough electrical power in the building, and they couldn't afford to upgrade it. They couldn't do a gas conversion because it was going to be also too expensive to connect to the gas line. So they chose to switch instead from 4 to number 2 oil with 2 smaller series boilers, and to install the insulated radiator covers with integrated controls and a fan. One manufacturer calls it the Cozy. And, you know, surprisingly, their energy use dropped by about 25–35%, because now the boiler doesn't cycle on and off all the time. It doesn't rely on just the outdoor temperature sensors or the outdoor thermometer. It has indoor temperature sensors too. So it takes the average, and then the boiler, you know, will turn on if it feels it's really necessary, but not if it doesn't. And the Cozy cover, which is an approved product for incentives, has a fan inside. So if the room is hot enough to not release the heat at that time, it saves it in the cover, and then it releases it, and then the fan blows it out. So it's kind of a weird old-fashioned thing that has been modernized to save energy with our pre-war buildings that don't have a lot of options.
No, that's a great example of work that can be done now and may not require immediate electrification. So thanks for sharing that, Valerie. Laura or Katherine, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of wanted to reiterate part of the process and what we provide as the accelerator. You know, as a free entity, even though we don't do, as was mentioned, we don't do energy audits, we're not competing, you know, with our market partners in that way. We can perform, you know, free portfolio assessments for property management firms and help identify opportunities in terms of compliance or incentives or, you know, other energy savings needs. And I just wanted to point out that, you know, Dermot in particular, compared, you know, to the other firms here, like has a substantial amount of affordable housing. Of course, the accelerator, we work with non-multifamily buildings too, like all types of buildings that are above 5,000 square feet and are privately owned. But you know, I think it bears repeating that Local Law 97 is a first of its kind in terms of legislation, and there are actually 4 covered buildings lists for Local Law 97. So just being able to go through and identify where each of the buildings fall and how to, you know, how that impacts timelines, you know, what reports are due when and all that kind of thing is important to then effectively like focus on the ones that need, you know, certain attention right now and also in the future.
Yeah, good points. Excellent points.
One
Okay.
thing I want to add and clarify is I think, you know, for us, majority of our buildings are 421A buildings. So they're affordable, even though they're, you know, they're rent stabilized market essentially. And we're, you know, that was one of the challenges that we really had to figure out of how that applies to the Local Law 97 rules. So Accelerator has been great in helping us navigate that.
Yeah, very different options for pathways. However, again, the PCMs are measures, or 13 measures that, you know, the affordable buildings have the option to do as a compliance pathway are things that all buildings should be considering. You know, that it's a checklist. It's the low hanging fruit. It's you know, all very important. So so either, you know, regardless of your affordability status with your buildings or the type of building typology, as Katherine mentioned, we work with all privately owned buildings over 5,000 square feet. So these are everything from hospitals, schools, hotels, restaurants, you know, any commercial office space, warehousing and manufacturing. So we cover the entire gamut, and, you know, are looking at a variety of different measures and energy efficiency, decarbonization projects that can be implemented. Yes, and I'm trying to monitor some of the questions in the chat. Some of them are around incentives and our offerings to buildings less than 25,000 square feet that may not have to comply with LL97. Yes, we can help you, and yes, incentives are available for those smaller buildings. So again, please, reach out to us after the webinar. Will connect you and get you pointed in the right directions to access all the applicable incentives for your building type and size. Any other comments from account managers on this question or panelists that you want to add in here before we move on to the next question? All right. So the next question is, how do you involve tenants and other stakeholders in your efforts to comply with LL97? How do you prioritize? And we'll go with that one second. So let's just go with talking about involving the tenants and other stakeholders. This is really key. And I think we've touched on it a little bit, but let's start with Peter on how you're involving your tenants or other building stakeholders.
Sure. Well, I think simply talking to the boards as much as possible, following up on all leads, requests for information, questions that come from them. There was one story I heard about a multi-building property we manage in northern Manhattan, where I thought there was a unique method of engaging the shareholders, the boards, as a step to try and get people involved, sent out to put on the doorknob of every unit kits for insulating around their air conditioners in their windows, and ask them to install them with instructions. And I thought this was a great way of making real to every shareholder the need for participation and to get them involved in the thinking about the improvements that were going to be necessary coming down the line.
No, that's great. Jane, how do you involve your tenants or other stakeholders?
Yeah, this has been a huge piece of our program. I mean, I think it's 60% of building missions are contributed by tenants, both residential and retail. So we've really, again, in this first phase, concentrated on how to engage the folks that we sort of can't control. So one thing that we did that I think has been really helpful is partner with Logical Buildings. They work with Grid Rewards, which essentially is a platform that allows tenants to monitor their day-to-day usage, but also it incentivizes them during high peak demand times to lower their usage, and they get financial incentives for that. So they actually get paid to just lower their usage by a little bit during specific times, which turns down free money. We've recently set up an integration with move.com, which is a platform that allows for seamless move-in for our residents, and they can actually set that up on their move-in. And we've seen a lot more opt-ins through that, which has been really, really beneficial. We also do a lot of education around sustainability. We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out to our residents. We do social media posts every month, just giving them, like small tips for how to change their life. It's just the small changes that make a significant impact.
Absolutely. No, all great ideas. And Gerald, do you want to chime in here on how you engage tenants and stakeholders?
Similarly to what Jane just explained, sending out newsletters, the boards would send out newsletters updating the owners and condos and the shareholders in the co-ops, what their progress is and what their efforts are, and just keeping them informed. And by the time we introduced the Logical Buildings, which I'm so happy, Jane, that you guys are connected with them. They are awesome. They even provide a report, to show exactly where your building is at in terms of energy usage and what your fines are going to be if you stay at the current savings level, if you reduce it. So it's a great report. And the exciting thing about Logical Buildings is that they partner with Parity. So if you have Parity energy, management system in your building, Logical Buildings will reach out to Parity and say, hey, we have an event, right? And Parity will make their adjustments remotely. Logical Buildings, I also got a phone call today. Right now, they're starting to call, you if you're signed up with Logical Buildings to let you know that there's an event. There's actually an event today that begins at 3 p.m. And the great thing about the business model for Logical Buildings is that they get paid through the savings, right? So there's no direct payment from the building or from the residents. If you sign up, they get a percentage of the savings, and residents can earn some money and the buildings can earn some money. About 2 months ago, we got, I don't know, maybe 60, 70 checks from Con Edison for the buildings that are signed up with Logical Buildings. So, you know, that's how we do it. And Jane, I'm really happy that there's someone else out there that is utilizing Logical Buildings. They're awesome.
That's great. Account managers, anyone want to chime in on other tenant or stakeholder involvement approaches that you've seen being utilized out there?
Yeah, I'll do that. So I'm working with the Douglas Elliman building, and I've been doing it for quite a long time. It's close to 300,000 square feet, so it's a large building in the West Village. And as is typical in New York, it's a very old building. And so they need to upgrade their elevators. They need a new roof. They need better insulation. They've already done the steam traps in every single apartment and the radiators. They've already done newer controls of BMS system in the boiler room. But there's more work to do. So the way they do it to work with the shareholders is, and I, as the accelerator, I help the board get to this point, but I help them find, you know, the engineering firm and the contractor for whatever it is they want to do. They bring in their own bank representative, their accountant, and their legal person. And then they, without my involvement, they then have a meeting with them. The board has a meeting with those professionals that are guiding them. And they go over what they want to cover when they have a meeting with the shareholders. And this is all designed to sort of take the heat off the board and explain to the shareholders that these projects must be done. And there's not a lot of point in, you know, complaining about it. They've done their homework. These are the advisors, and they're saying, we need to do it. We need to do it this way, whether it's elevator upgrade or whatever. And of course, the contractors we help them find have access to all the incentives on it and NYSERDA as well. So then they have a second meeting with the shareholders, and the contractors and legal team and accountants and so on have been told ahead of time, if you get asked this type of question, please answer it this way. And so everybody is super prepared for this meeting with the shareholders. And then they do it, and then it's kind of calm and everybody's, you know, on board. And then for another project, they do the same process again. And they update their shareholders monthly with newsletters, just like, I forget who else said that. Gerald, I think, said that. And so they're, you know, they're moving forward with a big, complicated building, but they're getting more projects done than most buildings do. And, you know, getting cooperation, and making it look like or making it actually a collaboration with your shareholders is key. Because people don't like to be told what to do. They like to be involved in the process, and these meetings involve them in the process.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback off of what Valerie is saying. It's education, it's involvement. That is key.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I agree. In that vein, I actually have another property management firm I work with that primarily works with commercial buildings. And in the, you know, when faced with the challenges of commercial office spaces, you know, becoming revitalized post-COVID, this particular one has created a commercial tenant sustainability and health committee that will have an upcoming meeting, probably even in person, that I might go to as you know, a free representative of New York City Accelerator, to meet with them, speak with them, educate them about Local Law 97 and how that impacts their building, and, you know, help them think about ways as a community, if this sort of collaborative sense between tenants and owners to improve their space as far as, again, the cost savings associated with decarbonization as well as the benefits, including, you know, the compliance with the law and other beneficial things.
No, that's great. Anyone else want to chime in before we move on to the next question? But again, just to reiterate, education, involvement, communication, and consistency in those areas is key. It's not a one and done. It's an ongoing effort for sure. Okay, so how do you prioritize and plan for decarbonization projects within your portfolio? And Peter, let's start with you.
Sure. We started a couple of years ago by utilizing our benchmarking data and working with SWA, Stephen Winter Associates, generated estimated fines for each of our properties. I would note that recently the BEEX estimator has been a valuable tool also in trying to get a document to present to boards to show what their exposure is projected to be. But then taking those fine estimates, we triage them for those with the largest fines in the first cycle and focused on contacting and working with those boards first to try and help them engage consultants. Where possible, we recommend combining a local law 87 energy audit with a 97 study. All the firms doing the audits are quite capable of adding on recommendations for 97 capital planning as well. So that's a good way for us to prioritize.
That's great. Let's go to Jane. Just to reiterate, how do you prioritize and plan your projects within your portfolio?
I think, you know, we've really looking at our assessment, similar to Peter, we really looked at the buildings, one that fit the 321 pathway. We concentrated on those to make sure that we can get those done by the end of 2024. And again, those are just simple things you can do to just make the building more sustainable. And then we are really prioritizing based on who is showing the largest fines in 2030. Trying to do it all, but obviously we're going to start with the buildings that need the most work. We do a lot to involve and train our teams. I think this is really important, getting the people on the ground to really help you understand what can be done. They know their buildings best. We've brought in consultants who have been incredible. We work with Ross Energy, who has done a great job training our teams on efficient management of their buildings, and so that they can also come to us and tell us what decarb projects would make sense for them. We use Bright Power to really analyze the trends every quarter, and again, just so that they can help us really understand what can be done, what is the best thing to do the earliest, making sure that it meets the end of useful life. I think Peter or Gerald mentioned this earlier. So again, it's really, it's a team effort. So
great. And let's go to Gerald. Again, to remind you, we're talking about how to prioritize, how you're planning and prioritizing the work in your portfolio.
Well, you have to really reach for the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that's easy to get done. When we connected with New York Accelerator in 21, there was a company that provided free aerators, free LEDs. I don't know if that program is still in place, but we had taken advantage of it. And a lot of the rental units, because it's in a co-op building, it's in a condo. A lot of the residents and even some of the shareholders took advantage of that. And also looking at your budget and see, you have to prioritize. But we were able to really take advantage of a lot of the incentives, and that's how we were able to really finance, what we were able to do at the 3 buildings.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to go off script a little bit because one of the things that I think we've kind of tangentially touched on is building operator training, and just going to throw that out to whoever wants to pick it up. There are NYSERDA programs that fund building operator trainings for your teams. Has anyone pursued that for your?
Sure, I'll jump in here. We worked with SWA again, Stephen Winter, and got a ponds training grant from NYCERTA, and are now in the end stages of a 1.5-year program to train all our building operating staff, both in the knowledge, efficient operation, upgrades, maintenance, and this has been invaluable. It's provided us with a set of resources which we can continue to use after the end of the program to train new building staff who come on and to maintain efficient operation. It's been very valuable.
That's great. Yeah. And that's something that a number of service providers are offering. And it is, practically, I think there's, as you mentioned, there's some in-kind contribution required, but for the most part, it's a no cost building operator training, which is something that you should look into if you haven't already. Anyone else want to add on to that aspect of your building management process?
Yeah, our training, we also got the NYCERTA funding. I mean, it's just, there's so many great incentives out there. So definitely urge everyone to look into it and use them.
Great. Okay. Then let's move on to talk about what are the most significant challenges that you faced in the process of decarbonizing your properties. And let's start, Jane, with you.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge we have faced is just the need for more clarity around the law. We really try to be very proactive in our approach, trying to make sure that we're budgeting and planning for everything way ahead. So having the lack of information has been something that has been very challenging. One of the other challenges we're facing is sort of how to engage our retail tenants. Obviously, we're responsible for them having to meet the requirements as well. And if those folks that have leases that were prior to the law coming into effect can't really use the lease to do anything. So it's like, how do we make sure that we're not spending more money than we have to, and also engaging our retail tenants in doing that. So, it's very challenging to report to partners and investors amidst the lack of clarity as well. And that's a big part of our job. So just really needing more information.
Yep. Okay. And let's go. Thank you, Jane. Let's go to Gerald to address your most significant challenges in your decarbonization efforts.
It's, getting buy-in from the boards, convincing the junior account executives to reach out to the board, to just communicate and to try to get buy-in, and along with the getting buy-in from the resident manager. If you don't get buy-in from the superintendent, your resident manager, of the board, then you're dead in the water. So that's the challenge. And as you said, bringing Accelerator to board meetings, setting up other professional engineering firms to speak to the board, showing examples of success stories, right, to convince the board to move forward. So, getting buy-in from the people that really make the decision in terms of moving forward, that's everyone's challenge.
Yep. And that's often something that I think is often overlooked in terms of the amount of time needed to build, to educate and build consensus and get decisions to move projects forward. I don't know if any of the other account managers or anyone else wants to address that, but just it is, something that it is a long-term process in a lot of cases. So
I would like to add something quickly if I can here. I think, and Gerald sort of hinted at this, there were many boards who just didn't believe that it was real, that the city was really going to find buildings for their performance in the first years after the law was passed. And as Gerald also mentioned, informing them clearly of what it was about. Second point I would make is the difficulty of co-ops getting financing. If they have a mortgage in place, that mortgage holder has first right of review and refusal for secondary loans that happen. So co-ops getting money to fund projects can be difficult. Also, incentives are becoming more and more oriented towards affordable housing and less towards market rate. So that adds to the difficulty of availability of funds for that sector. And finally, I would mention that there's a competition for funds available from many buildings because they're also facing large costs for FISP facade work and parking garage repairs, which also place large demands on budgets, funding, assessments, refinancing. So there's a lot of competition for the dollars that these boards can come up with.
Yeah, no, very, very true. Anyone else want to?
I can add something about the financing and the challenges. We were working with a very large co-op, and their mortgage had just been terminated. You know, it ended. They'd repaid it, and so I thought they'd be an excellent candidate for PACE lending, because the problem with PACE is usually the mortgagee for the co-op, they don't agree to doing the PACE financing. And there's multiple reasons why they won't. You also can't use PACE for condos because they have separate ownership of each unit. So it doesn't work. So I encourage them to, pursue the PACE option, which they did. And they talked to a number of PACE lenders and our partner that manages them for us. And it just didn't work. They wouldn't finance all the projects they wanted to do. They had way more projects that they thought were energy efficient, but the PACE lender did not. And their rates were kind of on the high side. So what they ended up doing was going to a regular mortgage broker and took out another mortgage. And that way they were able to finance everything they wanted to at a lower rate. So I don't mean to badmouth PACE. PACE is very effective with commercial buildings, but it does have an issue with multifamily. And for challenges, I have a big commercial account. It's actually an owner of a large supermarket chain, and they're trying to budget. It's a very low margin business, and they're trying to budget for all their stores, and the penalties for local law 97 are just throwing them off completely, and they just don't know what to do.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on general challenges or financial challenges and/or solutions that they've identified?
I will say that, one thing that's good to keep in mind is that, especially when it comes to local law 97, DOB is issuing new rules fairly, frequently. And we've already seen 2 rounds of rules come out with, brand new implementation aspects of the law. So, it's, again, good to be able to check in with the accelerator, even if you're just, looking at our website or following us on social media or whatever, because we try to share that information, with our clients. And again, some of that can help with the implementation, challenges. For example, the good faith effort and things that, previously didn't exist were a part of the most recent round of rules that came out. And the information guide that I think you shared earlier in the presentation, Lisa, has 98 pages worth of information that is now available to understand what complying for Article 320 buildings will look like, and that kind of thing. So I guess all of this is to say that there are new things being introduced, and it's good to keep on top of those things. And as far as like the financing part of it goes, there are new financial products coming out as well that are PACE, non-PACE, other things too, which is why it's helpful that we have financing specialists within the accelerator
Right.
who can update you about like what the, newest like offerings are and that kind of thing, because just like the technology is changing frequently and just like the legislation, is undergoing changes, the different incentives and financing opportunities are changing too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Catherine.
Can I
And-
Lisa,
say
if I
something?
may, I wanted to
Yeah.
add one point quickly on a challenge, a disconnect, difficulty that many of our pre-war co-op buildings face. That when they were converted in the 70s, 80s, 90s, those that had commercial space, the commercial space was often separated in ownership from the co-op. So, but in terms of 97, the energy usage within those commercial spaces is combined and counts against the co-op's filing. While at the same time, they have little or no control over the operation, whether improvements are made within those spaces or not. One path is when leases are renewed to add in requirements, but that has to be negotiated in and is very difficult. So that is a challenge many buildings face as well.
Yeah, no, great point. Great point. Someone else has, yeah.
That
go ahead.
reminds me of one more thing I forgot to mention, which is that one of these new things that also just came into the market like this past week was a series of playbooks and other informational materials from the Building Energy Exchange in partnership with NYSERDA and the Institute for Market Transformation about high performance leasing and engaging with commercial tenants especially. And I attended the sort of unveiling webinar for that a week or two ago and asked about what about mid lease term, and they did talk about various legal things like riders and amendments and things like that. So it's a whole new world that we're exploring together here, but I definitely recommend folks check that out on the Building Energy Exchange website about
Yep, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, green leases or high performance leases are moving forward fast. So definitely.
Lisa, I'd like to add something about the laws. if I
Yes.
could.
Yes.
It's very important, as I guess it was either Catherine or Laura, I'm not sure, said it's very important to keep up with the laws. Now, if you go on the, just do a regular internet hunt for Local Law 97 or even Local Law 88, which you have to comply with this year, you may get a PDF that may not be the latest, may not be up to date. So the best way to do it is contact us and we'll give you the links to the very current law and rules for all the laws and rules. And if you save that link, it will always be updated up to the minute. As soon as the council changes something, they update it. So it's much better to do it that way. And then I think someone else mentioned too, the Article 321, Local Law 97, Article 320, and Article 321 DOB guides have already been released, and they're very, very helpful to explain the law in simpler terms than the law itself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. All right. One more opening to chime in on the significant challenges. Okay, then we will move on to what actions remain for you in terms of LL97 compliance and how do you plan to achieve them? Before we dive into that, I kind of want to circle back. We've had a question or two in the chat around the 321 building, specifically for Jane, and asking, are you pursuing the PECM prescriptive pathway, or how are you approaching compliance for your affordable buildings?
Yeah, I mean, we are pursuing it everywhere we absolutely can. I mean, the way the law is written right now is that if we are in compliance with the 13 measures, we would be relieved of the penalties in perpetuity. So just is a no-brainer. I think we have hired consultants. A lot of our buildings were up for Local Law 87 anyway. So kind of what Peter was saying, we've tagged on local law 97 compliance into those reports. And we're working really with them to ensure compliance. And you know, I'll just make it, again, it's 13 simple measures, somewhat simple. If you have steam traps, it may not be that simple, but for the most part, they're pretty simple and low cost, and it makes your building more efficient. We're even doing some of these things in buildings that aren't on 321 pathways just because it makes sense. So it's really like if you don't have a local law 87 report due, you can hire a consultant to just do a local law 97 assessment, and then they help you kind of figure out if there are any incentives that would apply, and to make sure that you're in compliance.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking that BECM 321 question. Do you want to continue on in terms of kind of remaining, or, you know, what's next in terms of your LL97 compliance plans?
Yeah, I mean, for us now, the hard work really starts. I think we're really looking into what capital improvements need to be done across our buildings. You know, what technology is out there that would make sense to put into buildings where you know, we wouldn't be swapping out the mechanicals. You know, being a good fiduciary for clients is very important to us. So we won't replace something just to replace something. I mean, it's also not sustainable. So, you know, we're looking for projects that are financially accretive, which is taking some time and a lot of vetting. We are making sure that, you know, trying to figure out what actually makes sense as far as for the building. So like sealing the windows, any replacing windows, and it's really looking into the big CapEx projects that we're not planning for over the next 6 years.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Gerald, do you want to talk about what your plans are now, continuing to move forward for compliance?
Well, basically to take the playbook that has worked in several of the buildings and just promoting them forward on these other buildings. Again, the challenge is buy-in, you know, from the boards and resident managers and that takes time.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm thinking that what we should do is just put the fines right on the agenda, like on the bottom of the agenda. So every month the boards are like, okay, we got fines. Because what I also do, I put the local law 11, you know, a filing date on the agenda so that the boards can see, oh my God, like we have to plan for next year because we have our filing period due. So I'm thinking about, I have to think of different ways to just, you know, push and get buy-in from the individuals that really, you know, make the decisions to move forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Peter, do you want to chime in on, you know, what
Sure.
moving forward?
I would just mention to Jane's point about 87 that you can do the audits up to 4 years in advance. So that can help as a planning tool if you're in that range also. But the challenge now is moving beyond this first group of buildings where relatively simple measures can bring most of them into compliance, to developing more comprehensive compliance plans that begin to think about meeting the electrification and zero carbon goals. Many more buildings will have to take action now for the second cycle, and it will be here before we know it, just as 2025 came on us a lot faster than many people thought in terms of planning and getting projects done. Creative financing solutions are needed here. And I recently became aware of the design charrettes that are possible, and look forward to taking advantage of that as larger comprehensive plans are developed to get them vetted by these expert teams. So I look forward to using that tool as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out for that new program that NYCERDA is rolling out. Anyone else want to add? account managers, anything that you're seeing with other accounts or buildings that you're working with in terms of, how they're approaching compliance, short-term, long-term,
Well, I
finance?
guess,
Mhm.
sorry. Yeah, I guess, if it's okay, I'll just talk about all the incentives they're accessing, because that's critical. So, one building did an elevator upgrade, and they're going to get Con Ed incentives. Many buildings have done complete steam trap upgrades, and Con Ed is very generous on those. I've had a building that installed heat pumps, and they went through the clean heat program, and they got a lot of incentives for that. A lot of buildings just want to upgrade what they have with the BMS systems, the boiler controls, and then the in-unit temperature sensors. A lot of them on the affordable end for smaller. I still have to do L87, but I'm sorry, 97, but they're a bit smaller than some of these huge ones. They've opted for the free LEDs or the bi-level fixtures in the common areas, and those are very, very good investments. Many of the buildings facing Local 197 have done the NYSERDA program. So there was a program last year called the Low Carbon Capital Planning, which helped them. It was like an audit that led them towards electrification. And then when they did that, they were, if they were completely ready to do a project, then they're eligible for the NYSERDA Pathways program, which has very, very generous incentives for heat pumps and domestic hot water heaters, electric domestic hot water heaters, for improving the roof or putting a new roof on, wall insulation, and so on, a whole bunch of stuff. And then the LCCP ended. So now our buildings are, if they have to do Local Law 87, I think someone already mentioned this, they're combining it with the NYSERDA FlexTech program, which pays 75% for affordable housing and 50% for market rate housing. And that way they're getting a very solid understanding of their building and what to do and what incentives are available to them for those energy conservation measures. There's other programs people don't always look at called the Empire Building Challenge in NYSERDA. And I have a building that just got 3.2 million from NYSERDA to install a new heat pump hydronic system. And then there's ponds, which are program opportunity notices or something like that. And I have two accounts going through the community heat pump system program, where they're linking up with other, it's a study, but they're going to link up with other buildings in the community to coordinate the heat pump usage with all those buildings. And NYSERDA is paying for the study. And I have one account that's doing the second study already because they're so motivated. And we help them hook up to the other community buildings, including a post office, a college, and so on. So we do that connection, and we always help them coordinate with Con Ed as well, or NatGrid. So that's, just want to say that there's a lot of incentive programs that most people aren't aware of, and they're good.
Great. Thanks, Valerie, for sharing that. I mean, that's a great lead into the next question about what specific incentives and financing solutions some of the panelists have used in their buildings. Let's start with Jane and talk about what you've used with success.
Yeah, I can speak to the incentives. The NYSERDA FlexTech incentive we've used for every Local Law 87, 97 report. Again, I think we mentioned this earlier, but training our teams, we've used NYSERDA programs. We're navigating right now the LCPP program, which, I will admit that like one thing with the incentives is it's a bit of a navigation, right? There's a lot of like calling Katherine, calling the people at Con Ed, calling people at NYSERDA, just trying to figure out how to actually ensure that the paperwork is right. It's also costly because it requires that you have a registered engineer that helps you with it. So, not to say that it's all kind of super easy, but I think it's worth it. We obviously use the Con Ed incentives for the demand response programs. That's really great revenue generation for our buildings for a minimal, impact to the residents. there's still, I was on last night trying to see what else is out there. So I feel like every day there's more, there are more incentives coming.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there. It's a constantly evolving landscape with incentives, and both at the utility level, at the NYSERDA state level, and and there's just as well as tax credits. So again, we do have a financing specialist on our team who can help you identify, financing options. Our account managers can help you navigate all the incentive programs that are applicable to the projects that you're pursuing. So, but it is a bit of, it takes effort and time. And, again, we're here to try to help make that process as efficient as possible. Anyone else want to chime in on the incentives or financing tools they've used for implementing projects?
I think Valerie gave a very good summary of the incentives that our buildings are working with, especially with her help. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, if you all were furiously taking notes, don't worry, we're here, we can help. And there are a lot. So you've got a great team here to help you connect with them. All right. Any other comments on incentives or financing? One that I think I saw in the chat was about demand response. Are any of the buildings involved in that program?
I think we all are. I mean, that's what we're doing with, I don't know, Peter, if you mentioned that you were, but I know that's what Logical Buildings helps us with, is demand response from both the owner-controlled utilities, and then through grid rewards, it's for the resident utilities.
I think that was Gerald who talked about Logical Building Systems and how they provide incentive programs for shareholders with rebates to them for the reductions they do. Good company.
Yeah, I just piggybacked off of Jane, so Jane gets the credit. Go Jane.
I did also see, no, that's great. And I also just saw a question in the chat about stacking incentives. So have any of you, used, incentives both from Con Ed and NYSERDA for, the same projects or types of work?
I haven't stacked them yet. We were looking into it, but we haven't, had success with that yet.
Okay. Anyone else, or account managers that have seen stacking done? I want to speak to that. I think that generally it depends, and it can be done. You will have to, each of the incentive programs are, will have specific language about what can be stacked and what cannot be stacked. So again, it's not a definite, it's not an all no or all yes, but it depends. But it can, in some cases, be done. So, all right. Well, we are winding down. I'm going to try to pull a couple more questions out of the chat here. There is a question on the Con Ed financing program for 0% or low interest. And yes, that program has been extended, I think, through the end of next year. So that's basically, it's been a very successful program. I think it went on hold at the end of June, but it has been extended. So again, reach out to us about that, and we can get you more information. Let's see. There are quite a lot of, we've got 54. We've probably had open questions in the chat. Let me see if I can find some general questions. And if any of the panelists want to chime in, or account managers, while I'm kind of perusing last minute questions here that you want to make sure we share with the audience today, please jump in.
Yeah, I'm seeing a few questions about you know, how often do I need to check these online calculators to know whether or not I'm in compliance? And the general understanding is that they use whatever is sort of the openly publicly available data. So, and it typically comes from local law 84 benchmarking data. And as you know, if you do benchmarking or associated with benchmarking for your buildings, which tends to be many of the same buildings as local law 97, because it starts with individual buildings that are 25,000 square feet and above, you know, you file for the previous calendar year. So the filing you would have just done May 1st of this year, 2024, would reflect calendar year 2023. But as far as I know, that 2023 data isn't like auto-populating yet. So long story short, your local law 97 compliance that you will file starting next year based on this calendar year will depend on how your performance goes every year. It's not in the case of Article 320 buildings, which is most buildings covered by the law, it's not a one and done, like, oh, I just checked and it says we're good, you know, for the next 5 years, so I'm not going to worry about it. Like, you need to be tracking your energy use every year, as you will have to report it anyway, because that could change, obviously, year upon year, whether you have the same systems in the building, but there are different impacts from weather and temperatures, or if you're changing systems in the building and say, you know, converting from a fossil fuel based system like an oil or gas fired heating system to one that's electrified. You know, someone also asked in the chat about, like, what are the coefficients for all these things? All of that information is now coming out through, for example, the Article 320 and 321 guides from DOB. And there are beneficial electrification credits. There's all these things that are parts of the law that you will need to do calculations for, you know, as they evolve.
No, thank you for bringing that up, Catherine. And we only have a minute or two left. Go ahead.
Can I add a little something just before?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So for smaller buildings and really any building, there's a free program called Cool Roofs, and that's free for affordable and very, very low cost for market rate. That's where they paint the roof white, and then it will reflect the heat off, which saves you energy. Free solar PV studies, we do that for large and small buildings. When it's smaller buildings, it's the contractor likes to do those in a neighborhood, so they do a cluster of small buildings at the same time. And that's, you know, either market rate or affordable, whatever the owner has. And then another a helpful one is the free LEDs in your in the units. And you know, tenants like that helps them. And then the free faucet aerators and shower heads, low flow fixtures, that actually saves the owner money, because whether it's a co-op or a rental, because that impacts and lowers their water bill. So those are all other programs to consider. And with regard to the program that Katherine mentioned, the Building Energy Exchange calculation of penalties, you can just go there, and of course they'll just have 22 data up, but you could input your 2023 data and now find out what your latest penalty might be.
Yeah. No,
if I may very quickly, key to that is that you have the accurate areas. None of these calculators are correct unless you've had your areas certified and you did it for the filing this past May. Otherwise, the estimates are not accurate.
Measuring the gross floor area, that's what Peter's saying. That's it. It was required by local law 84, but most people didn't do it, but now it's required by local law 97. And if you don't do it, you're going to be penalized and have a higher penalty than you need.
Yeah. So again, it's making sure that base data is accurate for calculation purposes. It's you know, both the measurement of the building as well as the proper energy usage reporting. So again, that's something that we'll all our team will review with you and make sure that that's in good shape. But unfortunately, we are out of time. It's been a fabulous hour and a half with our esteemed panelists, and I'm sure we could go on much more, but I hope everyone learned a lot today. And, you know, we will, as I said, make the presentation and I think the recording available So stay tuned to receive that. We will try to also assemble maybe an FAQ or the questions that were asked that we didn't get to, do our best to get answers generated to those. And again, thank you all for joining us today, and have a great day, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.